Sam Schnarr, and I think he may have recruited help, has handouts for the kids. So if your children would like to participate, have them raise their hand, or you as the parent raise their hand, and they will get those handouts to you. And then before we get into the lesson, wanted to update you on our plans for the summer. So generally we do a summer series, which what that means at its basic level is all the adult class, all the various adult classes come back into the auditorium for one class. And we're going to be doing that this summer, starting next semester. And the subject is going to be titled Dealing with Doubt. And the idea is looking at, quite honestly, some very scary statistics to see that doubt is a problem, and the problem is oftentimes how we deal with it and what we do and how we approach it. So we'll look at that, but then we're going to look at some tools and just challenge ourselves to how do we deal with doubt and what is the proper way. And as a family unit, like at your own home, and as well as a church family, ways that we can actually support people as they go through doubt and encourage and build up, as opposed to watching people leave. And it is absolutely going to be geared somewhat towards that high school, college age group. That's just statistically where a lot of the falling away happens, where challenging of belief systems happen. So college students, I know you'll be gone, but we will have it on YouTube. I very much suggest that you participate if you can. But as we all know, doubts can arise at any stage of life. And so whether you're a parent, it will be beneficial with your own children, whether you're in the middle of doubts as a teenager or a college student, or whether you're an old guy like me, and things happen and life happens in such a way that makes you start to shake a little bit, I think it'll be a very beneficial class. And just a note, parents of teenagers, we will have the high schoolers in here for the Sunday class, and then they'll have their own class on Wednesdays to sort of work through at their own age level that information. All right. Now to actually get my mindset on this lesson. This might just be particular to me, but when I study, there's a difference between studying for the purpose of preaching or teaching a class and just studying or reading the Bible. I might be alone in this. Some of you men might be much better at this than me. But when I'm doing a lot of teaching and preaching, I'm often studying and reading to understand for the sake of how to present. That's not the same as when I sit down and read just for the sake of taking it in, or what I might call meditate. In fact, I've found lately that I need a lot more of that, probably than I've ever needed in my life. So a while back, I started going through the Psalms, and the Psalms are just so pointed towards meditation. I mean, in fact, the psalmists themselves and oftentimes use that idea of considering or meditating. They're pondering things. And it's sort of presented in a way to where you think about, you ponder certain things, and then you start to make observations or draw conclusions from it. In fact, when you look at the Psalms, in Psalm 8, David says, "When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained." You picture David the shepherd laying there looking at the stars, and he's considering what's going on, and he starts to draw conclusions. He starts to think about what that means. In Psalm 77, 11 through 12, "I shall remember the deeds of the Lord. Surely I will remember your wonders of old. I will meditate on all your work and muse on your deeds." I'm just going to think about what you've done. I'm going to think about the work you've done. "On the glorious splendor of your majesty, on your wonderful works, I will meditate." There's all these passages in the Psalms where the writer, the psalmist, is just pondering who God is. Thinking about oftentimes his creation, thinking about his work and how he's dealt with man throughout history. Thinking about who God is and just pondering. And it always gets to oftentimes a place of shouting for joy or praise or exultation or crying for help or just being in awe of who God is. The very beginning of this lesson, we're going to be talking about just pondering creation. And then we're going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to take a nice slow pace, and I'm going to ask you to think. So there's going to be a lot of pauses. In the sales world, we call an awkward pause. That's not always a bad thing. There's going to be a lot of pauses to just think about what's on the screen, to think about the connections that are being made. And then towards the end of the lesson, we're going to draw some conclusions. Okay, God, the creator God, who created the heavens and the earth, what does that mean? What's that mean for me? What's that going to look like if I understand who he is through his creation? What's that going to mean for me in my walk of faith? So this is what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to start with a picture, and I want you to just look at the picture. Just mental note, take a real note. What do you see? What does it tell you? What do you observe about it? Is it pleasing? Then I'm going to have a fact that comes up, a fact about probably relating to the picture or the creation that it's being represented. And then I'm going to have a statement about God, a passage about God. Okay? And we're just going to take it easy and do 5 of these, and then we'll draw some conclusions. What comes to mind? There are conservatively about 100 billion stars in our galaxy. Obviously, it's an estimate. 100 billion. There are approximately 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. There are approximately 200 billion trillion stars in the universe. I had to Google to see how many zeros that was. Approximately 200 billion trillion stars in the universe. He counts the number of the stars. He gave names to all of them. Great is our Lord and abundant in strength. His understanding is infinite. Psalms 147, 4 and 5. Look at the picture. What comes to mind? A 3-foot-high wave breaks with a pressure of around 1,100 pounds. I didn't warn these gentlemen, so hopefully they'll participate. Can Dan Allball, John Christian, Derek Hines, and Jason Ellis stand up? They're all over in this section. Stand up so everybody can see you. We might get there with the 4 of them, but you add me in the mix, I guarantee we're at 1,100 pounds. Imagine this many men, these guys, including myself, jumping on you. You can sit down, gentlemen. Thank you. Ouch. A 3-foot-high wave breaks with a pressure of around 1,100 pounds. Winter storms hitting the western coast of Ireland. This is one winter season. They have moved 44-ton boulders over 300 feet inland. Tsunamis have moved 200-ton boulders 500 to 900 feet inland. When God responds to Job, after Job's had a lot of questions, he says in Job 38, "Or who enclosed the sea with doors? When bursting forth it went out from the womb. When I made a cloud its garment and darkness its swaddling band, and I placed boundaries on it and set a bolt and doors, and I said, thus far you shall come, but no further, and here shall your proud waves stop." What comes to mind? I learned this interesting fact that Mount Everest was actually named after someone, and he and all of the British people at the time pronounced it Everest. So we've been pronouncing Mount Everest wrong, at least I have my entire life. Mount Everest, which sounds wrong, is 29,032 feet above sea level and grows approximately 1.73 inches per year, something about tectonic plates. Somebody smarter than me knows how that works. Just as comparison, on average, a commercial jet cruises at about 35,000 feet. The lowest known part of the Mariana Trench, which is the lowest known part on Earth, technically it's called Challenger Deep, is that part of the trench, sits at 36,037 feet below sea level. Mount Everest could sit at the bottom of that trench and still be 1.2 miles below the surface of the water. That is over a 12-mile difference from the tip of Mount Everest to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. For the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods, in whose hand are the depths of the earth. The peaks of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for it was he who made it, and his hands formed the dry land. One interesting fact is that eyeball on that eagle is the same size as my eyeball, your eyeball, but obviously on a much smaller body. What comes to mind when you look at that picture? An eagle has two focal points, one that looks forward and the other looks to the side at a 45-degree angle. This allows them to see straight ahead and to the side simultaneously. The eagle can see something the size of a rabbit at more than 3 miles away. Again, when God is responding to Job, he says in chapter 39, verse 27, "Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? On the cliff he dwells and lodges, upon the rocky crag, on an inaccessible place. From there he spies for food. His eyes see it from afar." Our last picture. Again, what do you notice? What draws your attention? Oceans cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface, and less than 10% of them have been explored. 94% of Earth's living species live in the oceans. Scientists have identified around 230,000 species. I think that was from 2018, probably more now. But estimate that there are almost 1 million undiscovered species remaining, and more species are being discovered all the time. Psalm 104, 24 and 25. "O Lord, how many are your works? In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your possessions. There is the sea, great and broad, in which are swarms without number, animals both small and great." So take a minute. I don't know which picture you like the best. Maybe there's some other part of creation that you would have picked. I don't know, maybe you like sand dunes. There's some interesting things about some of the world's deserts. Maybe you like drier type mountain regions as opposed to Everest with all the snow. Maybe you're a tropical island type of person. I don't know what part of God's creation. Maybe it's the woods. I didn't have any pictures of walking through the woods. But when you ponder, when you thought of just some of those facts, and then the hearing Scripture speak about God, what words came to mind? What did those things tell you about who God is? When you look at the world around you, when you interact with creation, what do you learn about God? I put some words up here. I guarantee we could have a much longer list. Power. I bet that would be on most of our lists. Wisdom. Did you hear the reading from Proverbs 8? That was wisdom being personified. When all those things were being, when the boundaries were being set, when the foundation was being laid, I was there. You look at the earth and the design of creation, and you see wisdom everywhere. There's planning, there's authority, there's holiness, you see, that just complete otherness that you see in God because of his creation. Yeah, I think you see grace. Andrew even mentioned that when he was leading the songs. There's grace that far more than just Christ on the cross. You see grace in creation. There's love, there's patience, kindness, beauty, majesty. We could go on with diversity, with care and structure, and whatever words come to your mind. These are all things that as you look and consider who God is in light of creation and what he's done, starts to give you insight into our Creator. In Romans chapter 1, in verse 20 and 21, it says, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks." Paul says in Romans, he says, when you look at creation, you should see the invisible attributes of our Creator. Seeing the unseen. It's interesting, that idea is very close related to faith. In Hebrews 11:27, it's talking about Moses, and it says, "By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the king, as seeing the unseen." I wasn't there when God had, this is assuming he did this, which I don't think he did. I wasn't there when God had the whiteboard out and was doing all the planning. We're going to put a desert here, and let's do a mountain range here. And you know where the biggest mountain range in the world is, by the way? It's under the ocean. Ha, ha, ha. You don't even get to see that one. I wasn't there watching God plan and doing all those things, but I can see aspects of him, can't I? When I look at creation, I'm seeing the unseen, the invisible attributes of God, his eternal power. Not just that it's a power that has no beginning and no end. And it's power that spoke things into existence. Just the idea of creation itself solely belongs to God. The idea to bring something from nothing we can't do. We can make a lot of neat stuff, but God gave us the raw materials. The eternal power, the divine nature of God. We see aspects of who he is, that he is not like us, that he is beyond us. As we contemplate who God is, we see these things in nature, as we consider his creation, as we meditate on these things, his invisible attributes, his eternal power, his divine nature. And he says, the Romans writer says, it's clearly seen. It's not hidden. It's not something that you have to have a PhD to understand. He says, these things are clearly seen. Just look around. And you can clearly see these things about God. And what's our reaction? Well, he puts it in the negative because of how they failed to do it, but the idea, the positive of this, is when we see these things, when we look around and we observe his creation, and we see his invisible attributes, and we see his eternal power, and we understand more clearly his divine nature, when we see those things, there should be honor and thanks pouring from us. Honor and thanks. The idea of honor is to glorify, to ascribe weight by recognizing real substance or value. That's that word honor. Literally, it's something that's heavy. It's giving you an idea of substance. That when we see creation, we should look at God and go, there's something of substance. There's something that is important, that's significant, that's valuable there. And then the glory is from good and from grace and acknowledging God's good grace. Giving thanks is acknowledging God's good grace. That should be our natural response. When we look around, when we consider his creation, when we think about his wisdom and his love and his patience and his caring and his planning and his power and all those things that went into it, as they reveal who God is to us, we should respond with honor and with thanks. Go ahead and turn to Psalm 95. This is not going to be a complicated lesson. It's going to be quite simple and just drawing our mind back to things that I think most of us already know. Go ahead and look at Psalm 95, because in Psalm 95, he refers to creation, but he sort of attaches some things together. Start with me in verse 1. Oh, come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout joyfully to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before his presence with thanksgiving. Let us shout joyfully to him with psalms. For the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods, in whose hand are the depths of the earth, the peaks of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for it was he who made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. For he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. Today, if you would hear his voice. Notice it starts the psalm as many psalms do, with this idea of shouting for joy, shouting with thanksgiving. It's a very, from the writing, it looks like a very public display of praise and joy because of who God is. And then in verse 9, you see, let us worship and bow down. You see submission. You see obedience. You see this acknowledgement of the Maker. Now, I could have started, and maybe I need to start with this idea that just the fact that God created, that in the beginning God created, gives him inherent authority over his entire creation. It's a silly example, but some of you have seen, I've got a few Lego sets at my house. And you take one of my big Lego sets that I spent hours and hours and hours on. In fact, somebody showed me a video of this. It's a big Millennium Falcon. And I spent hours and hours and hours. And all these pieces, there's literally 7,000 some pieces that you put together, right? And it's all sitting there. I have the right to go home and take that thing and just toss it against the wall. Somebody showed me a video of somebody doing that. It was a crime. But see, I made that thing. It's mine, so I can do what I want. we should acknowledge that God, being creator God, inherently has authority over his entire creation. Look at the response. Kneel down, worship. We're his sheep. He's the shepherd. We're in his pasture. But more importantly, look at the response that comes out of considering his creation. Shouts of joy, songs of praise, thanksgiving, worship, submission, falling down before our Creator. Go ahead and turn to Psalm 33. Psalm 33 has similar ideas. We won't read the entire section, but in Psalm 33, slightly different wording in the response. Notice he starts out again in chapter 33, verse 1. Sing for joy in the Lord, O sons of righteousness. Praise is becoming to the upright. Give thanks to the Lord with the lyre. Sing praise to him with the harp and with the 10 strings. Drop down to verse 6. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their host. He gathers the waters of the sea together as in a heap. He lays up the deeps in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. The sheer power alone that's demonstrated in God's creation and God's creative power. And to be quite honest, and I don't mean this as flippantly as it occurred. And what I mean by that is you read Genesis chapter 1, and you read a relatively short account, day after day, of God said, and God said, and God said. And the power that's displayed within such a small summary of God creating the heavens and earth should be enough to bring us to our knees. It should be enough to cause us to sing and to shout with joy, to stand in awe, to be in fear of him. But the thing is that honor and thanksgiving is not just words spoken. Psalm 50, verse 23, and I'm going to read the ESV. In Psalm 50, verse 23, it says, "The one who offers thanksgiving as his sacrifice glorifies me. To one who orders his way rightly, I will show the salvation of God. The one who offers thanksgiving in his sacrifice glorifies or honors me. To one who orders his way rightly, I will show the salvation of God." You see, honor and thanksgiving, that ascribing God the value he deserves, and expressing thanksgiving, that expressing and acknowledging the good grace of God, those things go together hand in hand. But notice what also goes hand in hand with those ideas: walking rightly. See, the proper response to understanding who God is through his creation, to appreciating his power and his wisdom and his grace and his patience and his love and all those things that we can see through creation, the proper response is not just saying things about our great God and expressing joy and thanksgiving. It's living a life that brings honor and glory. I'm not going to turn there, but I will, might as well. Matthew chapter 5. We're going to look at a couple passages in Matthew. Make this really, really simple. Matthew chapter 5 in verse 16, the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus is preaching, and he's talking about letting your light shine before men. Notice what he says in chapter 5, verse 16. "Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven." It's a very practical idea. I'm going to live a life in such a way that is living a life with good works, and people will see that, and what's going to happen? Honor will be brought to my Father. So looking at creation, responding by honoring him, means responding with a life of good works, a life that will bring glory to him. Very practically, Jesus again refers to part of creation in chapter 6. Notice what he says. In verse 25, he says, "Why are you worried about your life as to what you will eat or what you will drink? Nor for your body as to what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air, that they do not sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not worth much more than they?" Just a very practical sense, my response to contemplating, meditating on creation, my response to understanding who God is through his creation is trust. Jesus says, look at those birds. God created them, and God takes care of them. You're more important than they are. He goes on and says, why are you worried about what you're going to wear? Look at the flowers. the God who took the time to create such beautiful flowers is going to make sure you have something to wear. See, there's an important concept in just that simple question of, aren't you more valuable than those birds? Because we could have a God that had the power but not the desire, couldn't we? Our God could be anything he wanted to be. See, in order to build trust, there has to be the ability and the desire. God could be all-powerful and very unwise. Or God could be all-powerful and wise and have no desire to care for us. We could be like sort of the ant farm with the bully just shaking us up every now and then. Sort of seems like that every now and then anyway, doesn't it? But see, we've got a God who not only has the ability and the wisdom and the power to take care of us, but he also has the desire. So Jesus is saying, look, just look around at nature. Why are you worried? So one of our responses when we contemplate nature is to understand who God is, that he has the ability and the desire, and to build trust. And in that trust, we show submission, we show obedience. But I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about passages like Matthew 10. Matthew 10, 28 through 31, he's referring to the sparrows there as well, but there's another statement there. He says, why do you fear the one who can kill the body? The one you should fear is the one who has the ability or the power to kill the body and to cast the soul into hell. See, one of the very real facts about creation, one of the real facts about the power that we see demonstrated by our God in creation, is that power is absolutely able to deliver and to provide and to save. But that power is also able to destroy. One of our humble responses to considering the creation of our God is to realize that he is the king. He is the ruler. He is the authority. And therefore, he demands my submission. Because that same power that created is that same power that will destroy. You think about that all throughout the New Testament, or the Scripture. You think about the very largest display of God's judgment on this earth, all the way back in Genesis. And you had an entire world who saw the destructive power of Creator God in the flood. And you saw one family that saw the saving power of Creator God in that boat. When Israel was being led out of Egypt, the Israelites saw the saving, delivering power in the very same plagues that brought judgment and destruction on Egypt. It's our decision to honor and to give thanks and to submit to that God, which will determine what power of God we experience. What power of God we experience. I've got one last thought. One last rather simple thought. When we consider creation, when you go out today, I hope, it's supposed to be a high of 52. It still looks like it's sunny. Maybe you spend a little bit of time outside. If not, at least sit by the table, by the window, right? And look and notice the birds. Notice the grass coming. Notice the leaves blowing in the breeze. Notice, like we've been hearing a lot, you just sit there, that wind blowing by. Observe the creation around you. Think about what it tells you about who God is. Think about how in your life, through your obedience and your submission, you can honor and give praise and thanks to that God. But also think about Psalm 8. We started a little bit of this at the beginning. But look at Psalm 8. We're going to finish this thought. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained, what is man that you take thought of him, and the son of man that you care for him? When we think about creation, we should feel tiny. When you think about the Mount Everest at 29,000 plus feet, and you think about the Mariana Trench at negative 36, I think it was. You think about the difference. You think about how big you are on that scale. You think about, do you realize that on your own you couldn't survive either place? I think it's like less than 5 pounds of pressure, 5 PSI at the top of Everest, which you can't live in that. And it's like negative, I think, 16,000. No, it's not negative. It's 16,000 PSI at the bottom of the trench. When you think about the vastness of God's creation, you should feel really, really tiny. When you look at the destructive power of storms and of nature, and you watch National Geographic videos like I do with volcanoes erupting and tornadoes and tsunamis, and you see all these things and you see earthquakes, you should feel absolutely vulnerable and weak. We have ways of trying to hedge our bets, but ultimately, if God decides nature is going to take us out, it will take us out. So when we look at the stars and consider the heavens, you should feel very small. You should feel very vulnerable. You should feel very exposed. But notice one word I did not say. You should not feel insignificant. Because David goes on to say, as he's considering how small he is compared to creation itself, yet you have made him a little lower than God and crowned him with glory and majesty. The pinnacle of God's creation was when he created man and woman in his own image. And he shared his authority with us. And he said, you be my representation on the earth. You are my image. You are my children. And that same God who created everything with a word did that so that he could have people of his own. And so as you contemplate creation, as you contemplate the world around you, as you consider what it tells you about our God, and you honor him and give thanks through a life of service and submission and obedience, realize that it's all for you. It's all for me. So that one day we could stand in the presence of that God, that powerful, terrifying God, and we could belong there. And we could feel safe. And we could feel secure for the rest of eternity. That's the God that we serve. I pray that today as you go out and you enjoy the day, whatever festivities or family events you have planned, that you take multiple moments to consider who created it all. And in that consideration, in that meditation, that you give God glory and honor and praise, and specifically through the life that you lead. If there's anything that I can help with, that the church can help with, if you need our prayers, or if you want to submit yourself to that God, we can do that now as we stand and sing.